Welcome back to another edition of Knight Report Podcast. I'm your host, Richie O'Leary, and joined today by my co-host, Alec Krauthamel. And we have a special guest, Ben Pfeifer from Basketball Analyst. I know I was supposed to get that better, but I messed it up a little bit. But it is what it is. Basketball Analyst Ben Pfeifer. Ben, welcome to the show. But before we start, we do have two little quick ad reads. Get ready for football and tailgating season with Knight and Day Apparel. Our apparel is designed to keep you comfortable and stylish from the pregame excitement to the final whistle. Whether you're grilling in the parking lot, cheering from the stands, or our high-quality gear has you covered in unbeatable comfort and team spirit. Use the promo code Rutgers Rivals for 10% off your purchase. Score big this season and keep shopping with Knight and Day Apparel. On top of that, this podcast is also sponsored by BetOnline. BetOnline, basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back from opening tip-off to buzzer beaters. BetOnline has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup breakdown, live odds to bet on during games. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, political props. Head to the website today and get in on action on America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts. That, dude, I don't know how Mike does that. That is a mouthful for a goddamn thing. Anyway, back to the more important thing. Rutgers basketball, the season is around the corner. 2 5-stars for the first time ever. Not 1, 2. That is insane, first off. Ben, I want to get your thoughts on these two guys and what do you – I don't even know where to start. What do you think they're going to be able to do this season?
Yeah, it's pretty enormous. Can't say we're used to seeing this kind of high-level talent enter Rutgers. I mean, I liked Gavin Griffiths coming into last year. I didn't go as well as I hoped, but nothing like Ace and Dylan. I expected to go really well. I don't know exactly how well the team's going to do as a whole. I think there's a lot of, could be really good maybe, could not be good. That's kind of how it goes with freshman-led teams usually in college basketball. There's a lot of variance, but I expect those two to be great. Dylan especially, I think, is going to be one of the best players in college basketball. Ace is going to have his moments where he looks like that guy, and he's going to have his moments where he, looks like an 18-year-old freshman, which is typical. But I think Dylan is one of those guys who maybe doesn't have as high of a pro ceiling as a guy like Ace, but I think he might, and regardless, he's going to be like an incredible two-way college player, I think, from the jump. So really excited about those two. I mean, not any analysis yet that, super groundbreaking. Like these two are going to be, they're both highly ranked prospects for a reason. They're both really talented, and I think they're both going to be great this year.
I forgot to, before Alec goes, I forgot to ask you, just tell us a little bit about your background in basketball and how you kind of got started covering basketball.
Yeah, so I've been doing this for, 6-7 years at this point, just doing high school draft scouting stuff. I've worked in media. I've worked in the league for a little bit. I've done a lot of stuff just working on scouting. I don't know how I got into it. I just kind of emulated people I like, thought it was cool when I was in high school and just kept doing it. But yeah, now I work for a couple websites on the media side, and I do some in-person scouting stuff for Puma's circuit, which I know we'll talk about a Puma guy at some point on this show. But yeah, I've been around for a little while, but yeah, it's a little about me.
Yeah, and I know you like to focus a lot on the pro ranks. So when we're talking Dylan and Ace, I mean, where exactly do they sit in some of this national landscape, especially with a draft class last year that kind of was a bit disappointing, and then this year it should be a lot better. I mean, where do they kind of sit in that national landscape?
Yeah, they're going to be in that mix, I think. I'm of the opinion that Cooper Flagg, I mean, it's not exactly a controversial opinion that Cooper Flagg is far and away the best prospect in the class, just very, very special player. But I think Ace and Dylan are both going to have a shot to go number 2. Wouldn't really surprise me. I think people have kind of feel like locked in Ace as the kind of preseason number 2 guy, but I honestly don't think we should discount Dylan's chance to end up being the number 2 pick. Like if his season goes the way that I think it could. I mean, it's a really stacked class. I think the top, after Cooper, to me, there's a group of 5 to 6 guys, including Ace and Dylan, that I think could compete for that number 2, 3 slot. So it's a really strong class. Like you said, last year was pretty underwhelming. This year, there's maybe 5 or 6 guys that might have had a chance to go number 1 last year, including the Rutgers duo. But yeah, I think Probably wouldn't bet on either one to go number one, but
Mm-hmm.
after that, I think it's totally open for Dylan and Ace, depending on how their seasons go.
So I've had the chance to see Ace in person and Dylan in person several times over the years. What kind of stands out about, let's start with Ace. What kind of stands out about his game other than the crazy shot selection that drives me mad?
I think the main thing I always enjoy about Ace is just his fluidity. Like for a 6'8", 6'9" guy, like he's not the like most explosive athlete. Like he's pretty explosive, but he's not like a get to the rim 40 times a game, 50 free throw rate, dunk over you type player. Like he's a very like fluid, smooth player. And I think that's going to be an avenue for him to kind of improve as he goes on. Because like you said, like he's a pretty raw prospect in a lot of ways. Like his shot selection isn't wonderful. Like his defensive intensity isn't always consistent. It was great in the exhibition. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come, right? His playmaking isn't always consistent, but I think some of like what is always there is just how fluidly he moves and how flexible he is, how he can like get into his breaks and bend around defenses, like and get lower than opponents. Even though he's not like the quickest guy, you can use that to beat people off of the dribble. And for like 6'8", 6'9" at this level, most guys can't really hang with that. So I think his upside, even though it's like very raw at this point, some of that upside as a handler and a driver, I think is really intriguing as he adds strength and continues to improve his handle, which is pretty weak, but also I'd say it's a fairly common thing for tall shot making wings at this stage to have loose handles. Like you see that pretty commonly, and oftentimes players can improve it. Not all of them do, but it's common.
And I guess for Dylan, the main thing that people come away with is, his pace, his control of the game, just as that young of a player. I mean, is that kind of unprecedented, I guess, the word I'm looking for a player that young to just control the game at his own pace and his makeup that well?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it unprecedented, but it certainly is very high level. Like it's definitely one of his more impressive traits. Like Dylan, I don't think has like the greatest passing toolkit like in the history of the world. Like he does miss some, I think, tougher interior reads, but like you said, his ability to just like make quick decisions, to pass the ball with both hands, to play the game at his own pace, and I think his strength is a big part of that too. Just like absolute tank of a player, and really doesn't let defenses dictate what he's doing and how he kind of gets bumped around. But yeah, I think his ability to control pace is really, really valuable, and part of why he's just going to be an awesome college player from the jump. Like you can just see when he plays, right, that he is very, very in control. And like he wins downhill a lot. It's not always like winning, with his first step. I think there's maybe some high-end athletic concerns with from an NBA standpoint, but he's like so good holding his handle versus contact. He's so good passing behind rotations, like really, really just like a talented floor general, and someone who I think can do it at the next level too because of his size and his strength.
You said before you covered the game at just about every level. Who do these two kind of compared to in terms of an NBA guy? It could be past, present, current.
Yeah, these are tough. I think like Ace I see as somewhere of like two recent guys, like a midpoint of like Jabari Smith and Brandon Miller.
Okay.
Like he's a little bit more dynamic than Jabari as like an athlete and a mover, maybe not as dynamic as Miller as like a pull-up shooter with his handle and a passer that we saw Miller. But I think that's kind of the range of like 6'8", 6'9" shot making wings where, I mean, obviously both of these guys are really young, and I think like I'm relatively optimistic on both Jabari and Ace. I think Ace is a better prospect than Jabari was for sure, and a similar level prospect to Miller, absolutely. And we saw what Miller did in his first year, just like being able to shoot at that size, despite Miller having some pretty notable weaknesses. It's just really valuable to have guys at that size who can really, really shoot. And Harper is a harder one for me. I think he's a little bit more unique. I don't really have a great like one-on-one comparison. There's certainly shades of Cade Cunningham in his game to me, like a little bit smaller and stockier, but kind of the same like innate pacing for how he plays the game while also being like a really underrated defensive player. And And then I think like just because of the lefty thing, there is a little bit of prospect Harden, early career Harden in there, though not the level of explosive athlete that Harden was. He was just, always a guy who could burn defenders to the rim with his first step whenever the hell he wanted. Harper is a good athlete, I think, but not that level of explosion. But the same kind of control with his handle, strength to hold guys off, versatile shot making. So I think those are the two names that come to my mind. But Harper, I don't have a great answer for yet. But yeah, I think Ace is again, Brandon Miller is a kind of good recent kind of thing, kind of comparison to latch onto. It's that's a guy who had a ton of success in college, looks like he's going to have a ton of success in the league, and I think Ace is similar. Also, much younger than Miller was as a prospect too, which I think is important.
That's definitely true. And I guess looking at these two at the NBA level, what do you think is their, swing skill that if it develops, their ceiling goes up that much more for each of them?
Yeah, for Harper, I definitely think it's just going to be how much he can get to the rim. Because Harper is going to feast in the mid-range. He's going to kill from the floater range, just walling guys off and using his jumper. But at the highest levels in the, hopefully in the playoffs one day, right? Can he generate consistent paint touches with his burst and with his, handle and his ability to get downhill? I think Harper has a good handle, but it's nothing incredible. He's not Kyrie or anything. But he can dribble enough to keep his defenders off of his back. But I think the extent to which he can actually get to the rim consistently is going to determine whether or not he's a legitimate primary initiator on a good team, or if he's just more of a really good secondary guy. And for Ace, I think it really is his shot selection, but I want to frame it in the lens of scalability, how well he can play off the ball. I think that's kind of a similar thing to shot selection, right? It's Ace at this point, as is the case for the vast majority of high usage high school scorers, most comfortable with the ball in his hands, not super comfortable without the ball in his hands. I think Dylan is an exception to that rule, which is part of why I like him so much. But Ace, I think it's going to be really important for him to learn how to shoot quickly off the catch, to make this quick, decisive decisions off the catch as a driver, as a passer. So that's a couple skills kind of wrapped into one thing. But I think we know Ace can score. Right? We know he can hit tough shots. We know he can face up. We know he can hit pull-ups. He's going to be able to do that. But it's hard to make a living unless you're one of the best. So I think is he going to go the Jeremy Grant route and just kind of be a guy who jacks contested pull-ups? I mean, Jeremy Grant's been shooting the lights up to start the season. Or is he going to, go more Michael Porter Jr.? I don't think he's, that level of shot maker. Basically nobody is. And really learn to be an off-ball shooter, to sprint around screens. So I think that's going to be the main swing for Ace. It's his willingness and ability to be an off-ball spacer, to play with the ball, to cut, to move. And I think we're going to see a lot of that this year because Harper's going to have the ball a ton. He hasn't really, he played a couple games in AAU with Harper, but that wasn't consistent. So he's never really played with other stars. I don't know what happened to my light, but he's never really played with other stars in AAU, or in high school, like a lot of other guys have, like Harper has. So curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that actually. Just being an independent AAU team where they do play occasionally a good team, but for the most part, they didn't really play that EYBL, that SSB, or even the Puma League at this point.
Yeah.
They didn't play that level of competition. How much do you think that kind of hurts a guy like Ace?
I definitely think it does hurt. That AAU sample is really important to a lot of scouts, myself included, just because it's the highest level of competition you can really get, right? Like Ace, and I think less in the competition, it's almost his own team. Like Ace in high school at McEachern, like he plays center for his team basically, especially on defense. And it makes sense. He's the tallest guy on his team. He's the only NBA guy on his team. Like it's not a very representative sample, I guess I'd say. Like it isn't really like Ace is not going to look like that anywhere else, right? Like how he looks like in high school. So I think that's one of the big advantages of, whereas Dylan, right, we've seen him play the highest level AAU ball. We've seen him play FIBA ball with the USA youth team. So we just like have more answers on what Dylan looks like next to other high level guys. And the answer is, it looks good. He knows what he's doing. And And I also think Bosco, his high school team, like did a pretty good job running some off ball stuff and letting Harper work as an off ball guy, despite not being super talented. Where Mickey Churn, I think, was more of a standard high school offense. You run some pick and rolls with your point guards, let Ace isolate and do his thing. So I think it definitely matters. It's not like a death sentence or anything, right? I'm not like writing off Ace because he wasn't playing AAU or anything like that. But it just like helps. It doesn't inspire as much confidence, right? As like being like, because we haven't seen as much of it with Ace pretty much at the highest level, and there's more mystery there. So
yeah, I guess to move away from Dylan and Ace, one of the other freshmen that you've at least gotten a little bit familiar with is the center Lathan Sommerville. I guess, what do you like from him that you've seen so far?
Yeah, Sommerville I think is like a definitely not an NBA prospect by any means, I think, which is probably good to hear for Rutgers fans. Just like a 6'9", 6'10" post guy. I think he's a really smart, sound defender. Got a lot of blocks in his last EYBL season, just like by being really well positioned and by being big and strong and using his hands really well. And then he's got a little bit of a post scoring game. Like, got really good footwork with his back to the basket. He can use his shoulders and his strength to kind of move guys. Like, not a really exceptional offensive player. Like, I don't think his assist to turnover or passing numbers or anything special. Probably not going to be a shooter, but again, as like a more undersized by pro standards, but is still I think pretty solid college big. I could definitely see Sommerville being like a two-way rotation big for a while, just because he is like a really sound defensive piece. He doesn't like need the ball on offense. He can grab offensive rebounds, slip in offensive boards when he needs to. Like that's what he did with Brad Beal Elite a lot of the time. In his Nike EYBL team is last year. So I think he can do a lot of the same stuff with Rutgers. And I think playing next to Ace and Dylan is only going to be beneficial for him, right? Like he hasn't played next to guys that level of talent before. So I think it's only going to get easier playing. It's weird to say it's only going to get easier at the college level, but I really do think with those guys opening up so much space because teams have to pay attention to them, Sommerville could have a chance to get easier buckets as well.
Now, kind of let me ask you this. I know you're not too super familiar with this entire Rutgers roster, but so basically Lathan is going to have to play at least 20 minutes a game because they lost Cliff Amori. Their other center, Emmanuel Ogwell, is what he is. He's nothing special. Average at best, I would say. Are you confident that he can do that at the collegiate level as a true freshman?
Maybe not right away. I'd say possibly as the season goes on. I'm not like incredibly confident he's going to be like a legit rock solid starter from day one. I think that's a lot to ask of any freshman, especially a big. I do think some of Sommerville's issues as a processor, right? Just like the way he makes decisions, the way he processes the game with the ball in his hands, as well as some of his like athletic limitations. He's not like an incredible vertical athlete. And while he is very strong and pretty coordinated for a guy his size, like he's not the most incredible, like explosive above the rim finisher. Like he shot below 50% at the rim in the half court his last season in AAU, which is not great, especially for a big. So I think there might be some transition there, just like figuring out college bodies and how to work against them. So I don't know if I'd expect him to be like a real like high level impact guy right away. Possibly by the end of the season, I would guess, more on and off, up and down for him as it is for most freshmen, if I had to guess.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess last thing on this year's team before we can, kind of move into the future. Obviously, the problem with a lot of these freshman-led teams is it doesn't exactly translate to March. I feel like Rutgers has a good mix of those freshman guys and then some veterans as well. I mean, do you have those similar concerns with those two in particular leading Rutgers this year where potential for a flame out in March?
I think I have some of those concerns. Like you kind of have to with these teams, and I think it's not a situation like Duke where they have a lot of really like established veterans to go along with like a Proctor, Malik Brown, all these guys, Sion James to go with. Like the Rutgers has some guys I really like. What's his name? Merrimack transfer, the Durkak, right?
Yeah, Jordan Durkak, yeah.
Big fan of his game. I love his ability to defend and just bring energy and to attack the basket. Like they have some pieces. But I think it really is just going to come down to how well Dylan and Ace can play. So I think the ceiling is certainly there for a legit run to the tournament. But I think the floor is probably as low as it is for general freshman teams. That's how I'd frame it. I think it's possible. Like when you have two future top 5-6 picks, right, in Ace and Dylan, that's a good for, even though, you know, freshmen, that's generally a good formula for winning in college basketball. And I trust the coaching, I trust the infrastructure enough to kind of get it to work. But like I said, there is definitely a lower floor than I think some either older teams or more experienced teams where it's like, hey, there is a chance that like the wheels fall off and they have some really rough stretches and big moments. You know, we saw that with like, I think this is a more talented team top wise, like last year's Kentucky team, right? Flaming out in the first round, Reed Shepherd, DJ Wagner, Rob Dillingham, their main guys, high level freshmen, I think will be good NBA players. Ace and Dylan are better than those guys, but it's the same kind of thing, right? Where it's just there's volatility involved.
Kind of moving on to recruiting, you've seen all four of the committed prospects currently. Out of those four, who do you think has the highest upside?
The highest upside? Do you mean like from a pro perspective or from like a Rutgers perspective?
Rutgers perspective.
Okay, yeah. I figured. I'd probably say Lino Mark or Gevonte Ware would be the two. But I also like Nwuli quite a bit. I don't know if his ceiling is as high. I think he kind of is one of those guys like is what he is. Like he's going to be a really solid role player. But I don't know necessarily if he has the kind of ceiling to be like a legit star at the college level. And I think Kaden Powers is more of just like a role playing guard type. But definitely I'd say Lino or Gevonte Ware are the two that I think have the most upside to be just like really stud college players.
That is so intriguing to me. So Lino Mark, obviously we see the numbers, we see the tape. He's very talented. Gevonte Ware, there's just no tape on him. So I have such a hard time like believing you, to be honest. I know obviously you're pretty good at a job, but like what stands out about Gevonte that makes you like so confident in his game?
Yeah, he's one of these Puma Circuit guys where the Puma Circuit is relatively new. Like I think this is like its second or third year of really running at the level it is. So there's just not as much access. I was fortunate enough to be there and to be able to watch these guys play in person. And Gevonte was one of the more impressive players I saw at that level, playing for LaMelo Ball's AAU team.
Yeah.
I think it's like 1-of-1 LaMelo Ball, and just like a really large, overwhelming force, really physically, who's also really smart. Like according to Cerebro Sports, he averaged almost 3 assists per game in the Memphis kind of session. He's a willing shooter as well. He's not like a great shooter, but like he'll take a 3 every game or every other game. Like he's willing to do that kind of stuff. And he's just a really, really effective interior scorer, like 6'9", 6'10", which is like NBA potential, who knows? But we've seen so many college bigs thrive at that size. So I think the combination for him of his physical tools, like, and also the fact that he's very aware of his physical tools. Like a lot of really gifted young players, I think Ace Bailey kind of an example of this, like aren't very good at applying their physical tools. Like they're growing in, they're young players, they're going into their body. They don't necessarily understand the best ways to overwhelm them. But Gevonte Ware is no case. I think the first game I watched him play this summer in Phoenix was like against a team with maybe like 6'6", 6'7" was their taller guy. And he just like went to the post, drop step, score, pass every single time. It was a dominating performance, and it's what you want to see from guys who are that level of overwhelming. Now, I don't think it's going to be like that at Rutgers, especially maybe not right away while his shooting develops, his offensive skill continues to develop. But I really like his ceiling for them as just like a really versatile offensive big. And like I want to say again, like the playmaking has really stood out to me in person. Watching him move the ball from the post, make skip passes, make passes to cutters, like nothing incredibly complex or like he's not Jokic, but he can make these simple reads. And I think it matters a lot for a guy who's going to be a physical presence on the interior. So it might not be like a guy who pops year one and is a superstar right away, but I really do like his long-term potential. And I think, because he plays in this Puma circuit, like not a ton of eyes on him, not a ton of film out there, but like when you do dig into like the limited numbers that do exist there and kind of the limited amount of film that whatever we can get our hands off or see in person, like I think he's a very intriguing prospect that I think has a pretty interesting ceiling long term.
Yeah, and when you look at Lino Mark and Chris Nwuli, it's kind of tough to take too much because they play on the same Oakland Soldiers AAU team as AJ Devanza and Tieran Stokes. So what kind of stock do you take in where you have some of these role players when you have the mega stars on the same team?
Yeah, that was kind of a hard sample, I think, for both of them. I think especially Lino, who is most used to playing on the ball and to having the ball in his hands and to creating with the ball in his hands. I think that's going to be his role at Rutgers, or at least I would imagine, right? Assuming they're prepping for a
Mm-hmm.
world after Dylan Harper, right? Unless
Yeah.
something miraculous happens and they decide to run it back, which is not going to happen. But hey, Rutgers fans can hope, I guess. Anyways, Lino, I think, definitely struggled a little bit in his Oakland Soldiers time, but I do want to give him grace because Oakland Soldiers doesn't play the most real brand of basketball. It's a lot of isolation. It's a lot of just AJ Devansa, Tyran Stokes, go get yours. Other guys will kind of contribute off of them as they can. So while I do think Lino struggled, he wasn't a great off-ball player, his lack of consistent shooting was a problem at times. But overall, I don't think that makes me too worried. He was really impressive last season playing at Notre Dame High School near my area. His shooting was a lot better in that sample versus the really poor he shot from basically everywhere in EYBL. And I think I was telling Alex, I was at the game where he announced his commitment against AJ Devansa and Utah Prep, and he was excellent in that game, playing his usual point guard type role. Getting downhill, being aggressive, getting to the paint, really stout defensive player, gave another 4-star JJ Mandaquit a good amount of problems. So I don't think Lino is an NBA prospect or anything necessarily, but I do think he can be a very good, solid college guard for a long time as just a really potent attacker, very quick, good playmaker. Hopefully the shooting can be consistent, right? But I don't think the Oakland Soldiers sample, I'm not freaking out necessarily about that, just given the context. And I feel the same way about Nwuli too, even if it's a little less to that extent. But
Yeah, Christian Nwuli kind of intrigues me for the sole fact that somehow I didn't really pay attention to him until Rutgers offered him last month. So it's hard to really gauge an opinion on him. But he was ranked number 15, number 23, number 23, number 24 at one point in the nation. So what stands out about him that they had? I know right now he's at 117, so it's a significant drop. First off, but second off, what kind of stands out about his game that made him such a high ceiling guy originally, and then it just kind of fell off?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of weirdness with rotations. I don't know. I wouldn't put a ton of stock into that, but he's just a guy who, to me, if he was 6'7", 6'8", would be a first round pick. As just this 3 in rim protection archetype, where unfortunately he's 6'4", 6'5", I think.
Okay.
I've seen him in person at least once or twice. Does not look, I'm 6'1". He's not so much taller than me, but it's a really, really impressive defensive player, really, really impressive wing shot blocker. And I think he did that with Soldiers, but I first really got turned on to Nwuli playing with Wasatch Academy last year, and then Vegas Elite the last EYBL circuit, where I think he was maybe in a little bit more of a comfortable offensive role, but incredibly good weak side shot blocker, really good mobility for a guy who I think can probably play the 4 at the college level. Really great job tracking the ball in midair. He's very opportunistic when it comes to his shot blocking, and then he's a really great passer as well, on the offensive end. Some of the stuff I've seen him do in 4-on-3 short roll situations I think is really impressive, and potentially synergizes well with Lino Mark too, which is a good thing, even though those two haven't played together, aside from the Soldiers sample where it wasn't really a lot of Lino Mark running the show at that point. But yeah, Nwuli's just his main issue is his scoring. He's never really been a dynamic creator for himself. Hasn't really been super efficient overall. He was pretty efficient, I think, this year for Oakland Soldier, just because he didn't shoot the ball very much. But he's a pretty good vertical athlete. He's shown decent enough shooting numbers in small samples. So of course, small sample shooting numbers are always going to be kind of strange, right? He took, I think, or I'm looking right now, he took 25 catch and shoot threes and shot 48% on them this last EYBL season per synergy, which is wonderful, but probably not sustainable. But I think if the shot really is good, which is a big if, I think, I don't know, I'm not 100% certain. Like he can be a really good like 3-and-D forward at the college level, like probably a little short to do that role at the NBA level. I think he doesn't really have the ball skills yet to play on the wing full time. But as like a guy who you can trust to defend the rim and guard on the ball like multiple positions and then make good decisions with the ball in his hand and finish plays even if he's not creating them from the perimeter, I think that's a really interesting college role player type bet that, like I said, maybe not pro potential or anything, but I really do like him as a college role player piece, which obviously very important, even if he's not going to be like a big mega star who everyone's going to know about. I do think those guys are really important. And I think we shouldn't like necessarily overlook the way that he can play.
Absolutely. And talking about the other commit in the class, Kaden Powers, you said he's kind of more of a college role player type guy as a pretty solid shooter. I mean, what do you think is the best situation for him coming into Rutgers?
Yeah, I think Powers is kind of your like traditional combo-ish guard, right? Not necessarily skilled enough playmaking wise with the ball in his hands to play the one, and not really big enough to play on the wing. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like Powers, from what I've seen, is just not that crazy of a decision maker. Like below 1 assist to turnover in pretty much all of the events that I've seen tracked for him. But he is a really talented scorer, like a versatile off dribble shooter. I think he shot around like 36% on catch and shoot threes this past EYBL season. He can create off of the dribble and pull up as well. Like he was a really efficient isolation scorer this past EYBL season. Like just using his handle and his body, and like the way that he moves is really, really interesting to me. Like he's not the quickest or most explosive guy in the world, but he is kind of like sudden and shifty in short areas. Like he can change directions and like step back and sidestep and create space for his jumpers, which I think lends well to his current skill set, as like a combo shot making type. Not the best at getting to the basket by any means, but I think as like a guy who you can trust as an off ball shooter. Like he can catch and shoot, he can space the floor, and when he has the chance to get the ball in his hands, like in EYBL with the Rotary Rebels, he was asked to, be on the ball more and to handle more. But I do think playing next to Lino Mark and, the other, whoever else Rutgers has at that stage, I do think he's not going to have that same kind of creation burden where he's going to struggle with turnovers and decision making. So I think of him as, just like a solid combo guard who I think can come in, get buckets, space the floor. Not someone who's going to be your offensive focal point, but I do think someone who can potentially add some offensive juice either off the bench or as like a starting combo guard who isn't necessarily the focal point of the offense, but can be an ancillary piece.
Yeah.
Okay. We went over all 4 commitments. I have one last question for you, because you do get a little bit of a national scene perspective here, going to all these events. What is the feeling like among people and media and fans among this year's Rutgers team? I know it's going back a little bit to what we talked about before, but there's just so much hype around New Jersey, and we see it up close and personal. But what's the national perspective of this Rutgers team?
Yeah, I think people are generally excited from pretty much everything I've seen. I have quite a few friends who are Rutgers fans. I know they're loving it. I've talked to plenty of people at events. I mean, I certainly think a lot of people share the sentiment that I have of like being unsure exactly of where they land in the scope of college basketball as like, are they a real title contender? Are they going to, just like a solid tournament team? What exactly are they going to look like in the new Big Ten? I do think there's like a range of opinions on that, at least from what I've seen. It's not like everyone's expecting Rutgers to go really far. And it's not like everyone's expecting them to disappoint. I've talked to people who think they're going to go really far, and I've talked to people who don't. So, but I think undeniably, like, I don't know, not necessarily news or sourcing, but people are really excited about Rutgers basketball. And pretty much all of the energy, whether it's scouts I know who've gone to scrimmage, who were at the exhibition, or just people who are around that team, it's like a lot of excitement, a lot of good energy. Nothing like, crazy unique there, but yeah, you've got 2 really impressive talents and a team around them that seems bought in, right? Like that seems like they're ready to kind of embrace their roles. And I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm personally more excited than I've ever been to watch Rutgers basketball. I'm sure that's the same for a lot of non-Rutgers fans and Rutgers peoples out there.
I think it's the same thing for a lot of Rutgers people too, in all honesty.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess I can imagine that. I love Ron Harper Jr. as much as the next guy, but like,
yeah, no, it's crazy. An exhibition game had 3 GMs from the NBA, had
that's
20 plus
crazy.
scouts. I'm like, whoa,
That's
who the hell
crazy.
are
Yeah,
you?
like I knew people who were there from my circles. It's like it's like this is big time. It really is.
Jonathan Givney sat next to Richie and I at the game. It was crazy.
Good time.
I guess one last one from me. So Richie and I, when we're talking about the NBA, we are unfortunately fans of the Brooklyn Nets. I have long said that I'm fine with any of the top, as long as they get a top 5 pick and take one of the top 5 guys, basically thinking obviously Cooper, Dillon, and Ace, and then VJ Edgecombe at Baylor, and then Nolan Traore, one of the international guys. I mean, are you around that same range where it's those 5 guys that you think if you come away with, you're really happy with out of the draft this year?
I think those are, I definitely agree with a lot of that. I would add in that group Kasparis Yakuchonis, who's playing in Illinois. A little bit less known just because he's been an international guy. But he's been really successful at the youth and the college levels. And from a Nets perspective, I think if they can't get Cooper, which is, I would really like to see them try to get their lead guard of the future. Like, I think having a real playmaker point guard type next to Cam Thomas, someone who can really create advantages, and like that's why I think both Dillon and Traore would be awesome there. I think Traore especially as someone who I view as maybe the highest ceiling NBA ceiling of this group. Where I think the Nets are kind of in a position where they should be shooting for high ceiling guys. They're pretty much bottom out rebuilding as a franchise, and outside of a couple guys, right? Well, Cam Thomas is good. Nick Claxton is great. Not a ton of certainty on that roster in terms of like their long-term core or anything. So I think shooting for ceiling is the move. But yeah, I think as long as you're picking in the top 5, 6, I mean, but there's always a chance that GMs or front offices make a pick that fans don't like or don't really think is good. But in this draft, I don't think there are many players that there's some guys that are mock ties that I don't think are that great. But among like the real top guys, like I don't think they can really go wrong.
Nets fans having to watch shot selections between Cam Thomas and Ace Bailey together is just sounds toxic.
Yeah, I don't
know if I can do that.
Love the idea of Ace on the Nets just from that perspective, and I think they really need a guy who's like a playmaker initiator type. Obviously, it would be really cool. Like he's super talented, and I think ultimately the Nets just need talent. That's why I think a guy like Harper or Traore, or even like a Yakuchonis, if they don't end up picking the top 3, who I think is going to be like a really high level playmaker and pull up shot maker. But yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time to have a top 5 pick, really. I mean, I know this season's probably going to suck. Hey, they beat the Bucks yesterday, right?
Yeah.
They're cooked.
How?
They're cooked.
I don't know.
They're so cooked. The Bucks are cooked.
That's awesome. I would like to rewatch that game because I'm curious about how exactly that happened. Okay.
It was a good game, but it's at the same time I'm sitting there. I'm like, I want to win, but at the same time, I'm like,
please stop that.
No, what are we doing? We're supposed to tank this year.
Yeah,
risky. But that's all we got for today. Ben, tell the viewers where they can find your work and find you on social media.
Yeah, I'm at BJPF_ on Twitter. Everything I post will be up there. Doing a ton of NBA content for a couple different websites, Sportskeeda, Sportscasting, and my own YouTube channel where I'm posting daily or somewhat daily. I'll be out of town this week, so I'm not going to be as on that. And then as the college and high school seasons keep going, I'm going to be having do draft content. I'll hopefully get to be at some more in-person high school stuff and possibly get to see Lino again just because he plays like 20 minutes from my house. And there's a lot of really good high school hoops here in Southern California where I'm based. So
awesome. Yeah, we'd love to get you back on after you get to watch Lino again. But for me, Alec, and Ben, that's another episode of the Knight Report podcast. Signing off.